Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Pierce, and I'm the director of the Transnational Literature Series at Brookline Booksmith, just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and your host for tonight's conversation. The Transnational Series focuses on stories of migration, the intersection of politics and literature, and works in translation. The series was launched in early 2018, and while we miss having in-person events at the store, we love having this opportunity to connect with you all virtually. I just want to offer a quick Zoom webinar tutorial. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a few icons. One of those is a Q&A icon where you can enter in your questions at any time during the conversation. Another button will get you to the chat window. That space is there for you all. Please feel free to chat during the event. My colleague Ashley will be in the chat as well, dropping in useful information, including links to books by our authors. Thank you for joining us tonight and supporting independent bookstores. And finally, you can see us, but we can't see you. So relax and please enjoy the conversation. Tonight, I have the honor of introducing Jhumpa Lahiri and Yiyun Li to discuss Jhumpa's new novel, Whereabouts. Jhumpa Lahiri is the author of 4 works of fiction, Interpreter of Maladies, The Namesake, Unaccustomed Earth, and The Lowland, and a work of nonfiction, In Other Words. She has received numerous awards, including the Pulitzer Prize, the PEN Hemingway Award, the PEN Malamud Award, the Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award, the Premio Gregor von Rosori, the DSC Prize for South Asian Literature, and a National Humanities Medal awarded by President Barack Obama. And tonight's moderator, Yiyun Li, is the author of 4 novels, 2 collections of stories, and a memoir, including her latest novel, Must I Go? She has received fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, Whiting Foundation, and MacArthur Foundation, and has won many awards, including the PEN Gene Stein Award, PEN Hemingway Award, and a Wyndham Campbell Prize. She teaches at Princeton University. I'm so thrilled to have them here together in conversation. And now Jhumpa and Yiyun.
Hi, Jhumpa.
Hi, Yiyun.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you, Pierce. And thank you, Ashley. And good evening, everyone. And I'm very happy to see Jhumpa. We live 3 miles apart and haven't been seeing each other in person for a while. And today we're talking about Jhumpa's new novel. The English translation, the title is Whereabouts. And Jhumpa, can we start just talking a little bit about the creative process of this novel? Because you wrote it in Italian and translated it into English. Can you just give a brief history of the book?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Brookline Booksmith, for having me. I'm so thrilled to be part of this series in particular. What a wonderful series to have and to participate in. And thank you all for joining us this evening. Yeah, the process was in 2 parts, right? 2 distinct parts. There was the composition of the book in Italian, something that started in 2015 when I was still living in Rome. And when I started, I really didn't know where any of this was going, which is typical with most of my books. The beginnings are very vague, and it's rare that I really have a sense of whether or not anything will become something in the end. You know, they're more sort of attempts. And so I was writing out some scenes about a character who had begun to interest me, a woman living on her own in a city, and both on her own and also surrounded by people and by the city. And I kept putting her in different settings to try to understand who she might be. And so the book started to grow from setting to setting, as it were. And so I was just sort of jotting these things down, these scenes, and then I moved to the United States, and it was very interesting. The process of writing the Italian version was interesting because I really only wrote it when I went back to Rome, when I was able to go back to Rome from the teaching responsibilities you know very well because you have the same responsibilities at Princeton. But there are summers and there are breaks, and so in those times I did go back to Rome, and I would pick up the thread of the book, which would really only, I was only able to really do that when I was back in Italy, because at that point my Italian writing seemed to only exist when I was there. I needed to be there. I very much needed to be there. But then, some years went by, and I realized there was some sort of narrative, very different kind of narrative than what I normally wrote, but something that interested me, a new way of telling a story, a new way of building a character. And so the book was published in Italy in 2018. And then I let it sort of sit or walk around on its own for a little while to get a sense of it. Because, I think all books are a mystery as we're writing them. It's really only after we write them that we gain any kind of real perspective on what we've done. Even if we think we know what we're trying to do as we're putting the thing together, I at least feel still so close to it and so defined by it that I can't really understand what's going on. So that year that that intervened between the publication of the Italian version and the translation of the English version, I was able to have some sense of sort of what is the texture of this book? What is the, how is it put together? And then a year later, I came back to Princeton. I'd been on sabbatical for a year, the year that the book was published in Italy, but I came back to Princeton and I decided to see if I could translate it. And I was very, I was very kind of tentative about it. I didn't make any big decisions. I just thought, let me see if this yields an interesting result. And so in that spirit, I began, and I found it interesting. I found the reworking of it in English less destabilizing than I thought it would be. It was destabilizing, but in an interesting way, not in a debilitating way.
Yes, we'll go to the translation question, but you just said, while you were working on the Italian edition of the book, you found a new way to tell the story. What is the new way? Can you give a sense the new way versus the old way or different way?
Yeah, I think it's really because it's a new language. It's giving me there's a new set of keys, and they open new doors, and I'm beginning to experiment with other ways of putting a story together and thinking about all sorts of elements. This book is very much about, it sort of grew out of the idea of setting, right? So setting is one of the, when I go think back to the very first stories I wrote, and thinking about sort of the various elements of the story. So I would think about plot, I would think about structure, I would think about character, I would think about setting, I would think about the language, so here the setting really was driving the story in some sense, and the setting was revealing the character, her relationship to her various settings, and then the book started to become more of a meditation on place, and a woman's relationship to place and her place in the world, and these things started to emerge from that idea. I don't think I had ever started something well, actually, that's not true. That's not true, because I think so. The Lowland, for example, that novel, which I worked, a novel I worked on for so many years. Had glimpses of it, and then the glimpses would fade, and I couldn't get a handle on it. I didn't have the keys, and little by little, I started to piece it together. But that novel also grew out of certainly a scene and a certain setting, a very specific setting. So, but here again, it was the setting that was sort of the dominant chord, right? So I think that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Yeah. Just for those in the audience who haven't read the book, I just want to give a sense of the structure of the book. There are 46 vignettes, short sections. And I'm curious about the subtitles of each chapter, because some of them are concrete settings, like on the driveway, on the sidewalk, on the street, in the office, in the waiting room. And then sometimes you switch to time as a setting, in spring, in August, in winter. And all of a sudden time is a place and time is a setting. And then I like the sort of the repetition of in my head. Those probably are my favorite sections in my head. So can you talk a little bit about physical setting and emotional setting, temporal, physical setting, temporal setting, and emotional setting? In a way, I think I agree with you. The book is so much about setting, but it's this woman's internal landscape that is going through the entire novel, through different places. Yes.
Absolutely. But I mean, that is what's so interesting about setting, right? Because setting is emotional setting. It's both landscape and mood, right? And we know that from landscape painting. We know that from, we know that from art that deals with landscape. And we know that, there's that alchemy between character and setting. So that's what I started to explore as I was moving her around. And yes, I think the book is as much about setting as it's as much about place as it is about time, right? And time is one of those other big building blocks of storytelling that I thought about so much when I was learning how to first build stories, where how much time is going to take, how much time is going to elapse. And in fact, I think this issue of time is one of the central ways that I've been able to actually conceive of my stories and novels in the past. It was a driving question, sort of how much time is this story going to take place in a day? Is it going to take place in 3 days? Is it going to take place in 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years? I was always very attuned to this question, and story drafts would change based on how I was, working with time, and whether I wanted to really narrow the time frame or expand the time frame. And as we know, I mean, time doesn't have to do with the length of a thing, right? So a novel can take a day, as we all know, and a story can also encompass decades sometimes, and whole lives. So I did like that. As I was moving her around and I was using these prepositional phrases, right? That was the kind of the calling card of these pieces. I kept receiving in my head these calling cards of places, but really prepositional phrases, which is why then it pushes into seasonal, in spring, in summer, in August. Which are places, because time and place are so, they're so connected. And our notion of time is so it's so affected by where we are. Sometimes we're in places and time just goes like that, and other times we're in settings where time never seems to pass. Right.
Yeah, one of my favorite, I think I probably heard you read that piece in the stationery. It's in a stationery shop, and all of a sudden it became a luggage shop. The time span in that one, when the place stays the same, well, the characters have changed.
Yes.
the nature of the place has changed,
Mhm.
and time has changed too, just in one short section. So can I ask you to read that one section called In the Sun, because I think it will lead
Sure.
us to some
Sure. Yeah.
translation questions.
Yeah. So this is, so as you say, I mean, In the Sun is
In
an
the
even more abstract
Mhm.
idea in terms of setting. I mean, yes, okay, I'm going to, today I was saying to you, I was having lunch outside the library with my husband, and it was windy. And at a certain point, we decided to move into the sun, right? Let's move into the sun. So it's a phrase, it's a way of, it's an expression. Of course, we're not moving into the sun, but we're we're experiencing the sun in a certain way. And the book is also, it's about elements. I mean, it's about her relationship to more kind of environmental factors in a way, to shade, to light, to water, to heat, to cold. In any case, this is In the Sun. Today there are protests downtown, and the helicopters have been circling the city all morning. But it's the sun that wakes me up, and it beckons me to my desk, where I write, wrapped in my robe, and then it draws me down to the piazza, where I'm greeted by the contained mayhem of my neighborhood. It's a splendid Saturday, the first warm day. Only a few people are still wearing boots. I see jackets unzipped and the blistered heels of girls in flip-flops who can't stand their punishing leather ballerina flats anymore. Even though it's Saturday, there's still a dash of elegance to how people are dressed. The bold shade of a jacket, a bright scarf, the tight lines of a dress. It feels like a party, effortlessly organized at the last minute. The piazza becomes a beach on days like this, and a sense of well-being, of euphoria permeates the air. All the stores are full of people, long lines at the bank machine, the butcher, the bakery. But no one's complaining. If anything, they enjoy the wait. While I'm in line for a sandwich, a woman says, "What a spectacular day." And a man behind her says, "This neighborhood is always spectacular." It's my turn for the sandwich. "Just wait and see how delicious this one's going to be," the man behind the counter says. He's known me forever and makes me the same sandwich at least 3 times a week. "Today it's going to be the best ever." He dips a ladle into a bucket on the counter. He weighs 2 slices of fresh cheese on the scale, arranges them on a roll, wraps the sandwich in paper, and gives me the bill. "Here you go, my dear." It hardly costs anything. I look for a place to sit and find a spot in the playground where they deal drugs at night. But at this time of day, it's bursting with kids, parents, dogs, also a few people on their own like me. But today, I don't feel even slightly alone. I hear the babble of people as they chatter, on and on. I'm amazed at our impulse to express ourselves, explain ourselves, tell stories to one another. The simple sandwich I always get amazes me too. As I eat it, as my body bakes in the sun that pours down on my neighborhood, each bite, feeling sacred, reminds me that I'm not forsaken.
Thank you, Jhumpa. I just want to comment on, it's a book about a character's solitude, but it does not feel claustrophobic because, we just see her going around in the world, interacting with people, listening to people, watching people. But you said something about this. This is a good example. The last sentence of the chapter would be a good example to talk about translation. Can we talk about the English and the Italian?
Yeah. So there
Chapter.
was a moment here where I had to pause and consider how I really wanted to go about working this sentence, because what I say in the Italian, I believe, I don't know, well, the book is up there. Anyway, I remember what I said. And I said, she's eating the sandwich and she says, the end phrase is, I know that che la mia città mi vuole bene, which means I know that my city loves me, that my city wishes me well. This expression in Italian, which is very common. Another way to say to love, to voler bene to something or to someone, and usually it's to someone, and it's a kind of different register from using the verb amare, which is to love, as well. And I thought about saying that in English, and I just felt that the way, che la mia città mi vuole bene has, to me at least, it's also not the most conventional way of saying something like that. I mean, she might have said, oh, that I feel protected by the city, or I feel the city's affection, but these are very abstract concepts, right? It's very abstract to say my city loves me. What is that? What does that mean? And because she's not saying that she loves the city, she's saying that the city mi vuole bene, right? It wants me to feel good. It wants me to be well, wants me to thrive. This sentiment in which you feel kind of, you feel the affection of someone because they do want what is good for you, right? So I converted that into something quite distinct in English, by
different.
saying, reminds me that I'm not forsaken, which is kind of the flip side of I mean, it means the same thing in some sense, but it's very different. It's a very different way of saying it, right? But it just sounded better to my English ear to use this word and to think about the idea of feeling forsaken or not, to maintain also a certain, I don't know, it's just even tonally, I felt that it was better to use that word. So, I don't change the meaning of the sentence, but I change the energy of it, and I change the specific way that the meaning is transmitted. Right? Because it's not that I'm altering the meaning. It's that I'm altering the way I'm conveying the meaning, if that makes sense.
Yes. So in a way, the English book is a new book. Would you say that? Is it a different book?
It's a slightly different book. It's a slightly, it's a reconsidered book.
Right.
It's a reconsidered version in very surgical spots, in specific surgical spots where I felt like I really had to change something, or in this case, that I thought the book would be, it was really a question of listening to my English ear when I was translating, right? So the English writer in me is looking for certain words, is looking for certain constructions, is looking for a certain cadence and rhythm that is not, so the Italian doesn't always immediately hand over that solution, right? And that is what is so incredibly rich and challenging about translation in general, right? Is that no language will just conveniently hand over equivalents and solutions, right? Sometimes yes, but most of the time actually no, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that it is a reconsidered version, but it's not radically reconsidered, and I don't feel, I mean, if we sort of think about the example of Beckett, I don't think I really reworked the text in a way that so that it feels like two versions, that two iterations of a book that really bear comparison in that way. I mean, I think if you lay these two books on top of each other as if one were, transparent paper, it's all there. It's all kind of there. But then there are these spots there are these spots where I went in and made certain choices.
Right. You said something so interesting. You said, when you did the English translation, there's the surgical decision to put certain words in. When you think about the book, does the book sound Italian or English to you at this moment? Because you have done both versions and you have removed yourself from the book.
Which book? The Whereabouts book?
Whereabouts, yeah. Does it in your head, is it in Italian or English?
It sounds English. I hope it sounds English.
Oh.
I hope it sounds English. But but,
sorry. I don't mean whereabout. I mean this book as, in a language. What language does it come to you at this moment? Because you have it in both languages.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like I guess they're like twins or something, I mean, one was born and then another was born too.
Yeah.
And they're different, but they're the same.
Right.
And they come from the same source, which is me,
right.
But they're two distinct books, but they're not identical. They cannot be identical. They're actually radically different because they're in different languages.
Right. Well, now you have worked with both languages. I'm thinking about what you just used as example of The City Loves Me versus, I'm Not Forsaken. Have you noticed certain words in English that, common words that become less common to you now that you moved away from English a little and coming back? I always, because for me, coming from another language, there are certain expressions in English that are just shocking. The example I use is, we always say we kill time when we have nothing to do. I always think that's quite a violent, absolutely violent action.
Yeah.
You only notice that in another language, coming from another language.
Sure. Yeah.
So have you noticed those things in Italian, or have you rediscovered those common things becoming less common in English?
Well, I think very much so. I mean, I think if you move away from anything, that the whole experience is that the familiar becomes strange. But I think that's a good thing, right? I think that's a good thing for the artist. I think that's a good thing for us in general to start questioning things that we take for granted. And but also I think the two languages are so distinct in terms of how the sort of syntactic possibilities, the way sentences can be structured, the way, I mean, there are no, I don't have to use a pronoun in Italian. I don't have to say, I did this, she did that, they did that. The verb is taking care of it, right? So, when I was working out the book in English, I had to put those pronouns in, and that was already it was interfering with the equilibrium of the sentences, right? Because I was organizing the sentences in a specific way, and suddenly, I mean, sometimes I put in a pronoun in Italian. One can use a pronoun in Italian, but often one doesn't, right? And because this is a book in which I have pared back in a quite deliberate way, I didn't want the clutter, right? I didn't want the I avoided the pronouns when I could, or just whatever felt right to the Italian ear, right? The other ear, but I had no choice in working in English. I had to make room. Suddenly I had to make room for just different realities in the language, so but yeah, and those are things that suddenly English feels strange, and that, oh, I can't just get away with using the verbs to convey the meaning. I have to have the pronoun there.
You talk about how things sound to your Italian ear and your English ear. When you put the book together, the structure, with the more concrete places setting and the seasons and nature, how did you is it a more visual setting that structured the book, or musical setting that structures the book?
I would say both. I mean, I think I was recalling. I mean, the book is, you know, the action of the book is this character who's moving from place to place to place, and so of course I'm writing the book. Me, the author, I'm sitting in a library. I'm sitting in my house. I'm not going anywhere. Maybe I'm not going anywhere all day because I'm sitting at home and I'm writing. Maybe I take a walk or whatever. But you know, so the book is, of course, all books emerge from a place of stillness, right? I mean, well, that's not true. You can be writing on a train. In fact, the first piece of this book that came to me, I was on a train. And I took some notes, and sometimes I write very well on trains, even on planes.
It ends on the train.
and it ends on the train. That was actually the first part of the book I wrote.
Oh, okay.
That was the first scene I wrote of the book.
I
Is the
like
last scene on the train.
Yeah.
But even if we're technically moving through space on a plane or a train or whatever, writing requires stillness, right? You have to still the mind in order to focus on the page and the words, and the fact that your body is moving through space is kind of a secondary situation, because I think the mind is still, right? But she is moving from place to place. But I was conjuring those places. I was imagining those places. Maybe I was remembering some of those places, or but mostly I was sort of imagining her in different situations and settings. But I was also very conscious of the music of the prose, and thinking very much about the language, and also very aware of these units, these shorter units that were emerging as the book started to accumulate. These scenes started to accumulate, and I realized after a certain point that I really had to kind of respect the units of these scenes, and that I couldn't really suddenly write, a 15-page episode, right? That I had to obey a certain. I mean, there's a little bit of elasticity, right? I mean, some of the scenes are very short, and some of them are a little bit longer, a little bit more relaxed. But on the whole, they're in a certain, tight frame, and so once that was in gear, I realized I had to keep going, and I had to sort of obey this sense of of coherence, and similarly with the way the book was being written as well. I felt that the prose had to have a certain coherence, right?
I'm very conscious of the time, because they told me I have to stop at 40 minutes. But I want to ask one more question, which is, it's about migration and transmigration, which the movement. Like for you, I mean, I think in a way we have a similar background of immigrants, your parents coming from another country to this country, and I came from another country. But I think for me, the more interesting migration of yours is you're migrating into another language, from one language to another. Do you feel that this migration has answered some of your questions about English language? And has this migration also raised new questions for you that you like to explore?
Definitely the latter, and also in both things. I mean, I think this migration is the migration of my personal experience. I'm the child of migrants, right? So I have been observing and living and experiencing the consequences of their migration my whole life, and but without ever having fully experienced that very basic fact of having had a place and then moved into a new place, right? And I clearly was trying to understand that experience because it was both so close and so far. You know, I mean, I think if you're the child of immigrants, you smell it, you can taste it, but you're not really possessing it in some way, right? And I think my writing was born to be able to understand a little bit better without ever fully and actually experiencing that, you know. But speculating, wondering, imagining, trying to contemplate what that might be like. And but moving into Italian for me was my version. And again, I wasn't doing this with a grand plan in mind of, oh, now I'm going to be the migrant, you know. It really wasn't like that. But I think, again, it's only after you do things that sometimes you step back and recognize what's going on. And I think, you know, when I first started writing in Italian, I had no idea why I was doing this, where I was going with it, what might come of it. But I was doing it, and it felt, you know, it felt totally new and quite terrifying, but also thrilling. And I understood that it was a choice, that it was, this migration was very much a choice. It was a creative choice. It was a creative choice, right? It was a choice in the spirit of experimentation, of saying, what else is out there? What else? What's over there? You know, what's over there in that language? Let me see if I can start saying things in that language. Let me see if I can start seeing things in that language. Let me see if I can start hearing in that language. And so, you know, that's how it all started to build. And now I do recognize that in writing in Italian, it is the first time that I have embodied in language what my parents did in body and in sort of life, you know, and in day-to-day life, for very different reasons as well, you know, with very different factors at play.
Well, we can even just that we can talk forever about that, but let me move to the audience questions, because I think we have a lot of questions. So if you can put your questions in Q&A, I'm just going to start reading from the top. Do you have a different relationship to reading translated works, especially when you're not fluent in the original language? For instance, is it harder to lose yourself in those works with your awareness of the subjectivity of translation? So this is more a question about reading translation.
So the question is, what is it like to read works in translation, and do I read them differently? Or
do you have a different relationship to reading translated works, I imagine, versus reading English work written in English?
I've never distinguished, because it's all in English, right? I mean, now, yes, I am very aware now that I've become a translator and I teach translation, and I, you know, I think a lot about translation. So yes, I'll be aware in a different way. But I think from childhood, I've been reading in translation. I mean, so many things were in translation, and yet they were in English, right? So translation creates the illusion of a monolingual landscape, which of course it's not. But for me, even reading in English was a foreign language. And it wasn't even so much the reading of the fact that I was reading in English, which was a learned language, and you know, a language that I had to acquire. But I think what was foreign to me, even as a child when I was reading, was that all the stories were foreign to me.
Mhm.
You know, these were stories about people who were very different and living in families that were very different from mine and doing things that my family never did. And, you know, so all of that felt already at a remove. At the same time, it didn't, because I had the experience of reading, which is transcendent.
Yeah.
And I felt that as different as these people were and these characters and these lives, somehow I felt that they were speaking to me, and I could imagine, you know, I could imagine what it might be like to be that person, to be that character, right? So those are my earliest memories of reading, right? And those have really not changed that much. But, you know, I mean, basically most of the reading I've done as in my life has been in translation. Most of the, you know, most of the books that have really shaped me as a writer have been works in translation.
Right.
So again, I mean, this is not to say that I, in any way, that I take translation for granted. I don't. In fact, the opposite. But to say that, you know, the test of a translation is that it has to read as if it were written in that other language, right? And that's why we don't. That's why we say things like, oh, this was, you know, well, this felt translated to me, right? We don't want to feel that. We don't, and the translator works hard. The translator works very, very hard to create a natural prose in a language that is radically different from you know, from the original language.
Yes, since we're on that subject, I just want to ask you about the translation class you teach at Princeton, because I think one day I walked into the coffee room and I saw something you left there, just different translation of the same page of Metamorphosis.
Okay, yeah.
And then I thought I might have asked you, but I did not get a chance to ask you in depth about that exercise. So can you just talk a little bit? I think the audience would find that fascinating as I do.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think translation is the best way to learn how to write, you know, translation and especially comparing translation. So even if you look at sort of one sentence in Kafka in across 10 versions in English,
Right.
just one sentence of Kafka's German translated into one language, you're going to learn more about writing, about style, about word choice, about rhythm, about the cadence of a sentence than you will in any other way, because then you focus on the language, right? You focus on the language, which is the essence of writing.
Yeah.
And it's like a direct line to writing, right? It's a direct line to understanding what we do. And it's, to me, it's the most revelatory thing. And not only that, but it teaches you about this elusive thing that we call style, right? And what distinguishes one style from another style.
Right.
Well, the real way to understand style is to, of course, see a vast range of styles, right? And to develop a consciousness of what this range of possibilities is, because that's what style is. It's a variation on something, right? It's a distinctive way of doing something or wearing something or decorating something, you know. So when you look at that one sentence over and over again with these very subtle choices, and where's the verb going to be, and which adjectives? I mean, adjectives are extraordinary for translation purposes, because adjectives are, I mean, when all is well and done, I think I'll still be tossing and turning in terms of the adjective choices in this book, in any of the books I translate, because it's always an open question. Adjectives are so rich and so many, and you really just have to kind of pick one in the end, right? But there are so many others on the tree that potentially could have also conveyed that meaning and just shaded it slightly differently. And what's to say you don't want it to be shaded slightly differently, right? So translation is so thrilling because it has that ongoing possibility. It's this open conversation. Literary translation opens a conversation, and there's never a door to shut it, to say this is the definitive translation. There can be no more translations. That will never happen.
Yes, that's just wonderful. I like to hear you. Someone asked a similar question. No, actually, I'm sorry, I'm getting old. How did you balance fidelity to precise translation and mascating objective? Sorry, I think that might be. How do you balance the fidelity to precise translation and the marketing objective for making the best sense in another language, English? So it is about the translating of your own work.
Or another person's work, you know? I mean, yeah. I think with when I translate Domenico Sternone, for example, I mean, there are sentences that need to be, I mean, look, if you're translating to learn a language, okay, so when I learned Latin or Italian for that matter, and people were saying, okay, here's the text, translate it for me, you know, as a, you know, and when you translate on that for the purpose of understanding exactly what the sentence is made out of, exactly each component, right? What is it doing? What is this adverb, verb, noun, whatever? That's its own exercise, right? But then for a reader, you cannot be bound to that with that idea. I mean, I've just embarked on translation of Ovid, of Ovid's Metamorphoses with a colleague of mine here in Princeton in classics. And just today, I spent 4 hours in the library translating one of the myths. And you cannot, if I want Ovid to have a new readership in whenever this book comes out, it won't be tomorrow. I cannot render that Latin the way I would have rendered it when I was studying Latin in college, so that I would get, you know, a good mark on my exam because the professor would understand that I understood the syntax and the, you know, so on and so forth. I cannot. At the same time, I don't want to stray far because I see, you know, I mean, this book has, needless to say, been already translated. I have many versions of it lying around my house. I can pick it up anytime I want to see how another translator went about it. And often they are much freer, you know. And I think the purpose of my translation, of our translation, is to recreate the poem, but also really think about the Latin, think about the language. And so we're trying to hit that sweet spot, right? But other translators don't want to. Other translators have different objectives, you know, and different markets, right? Yeah, it's true.
Yes. At this point in your life, this is another audience question, which language do you think in? Do you feel certain emotions in one language more than another?
Well, I mean, for me, thinking is writing. You know, I think that the reason I'm a writer is that I feel that I really only think when I'm writing. Like really thinking. I don't feel like I'm really thinking if I'm out there in the world, like wandering around. I think that the true thinking I've done in my life has happened in my books. And so now that I write in 2 languages, you know, if I'm writing in Italian, I'm obviously thinking in Italian. And when I'm writing in English, I'm thinking in English. And that's how I feel, that's how it's playing out. I mean, I think this is an interesting philosophical question, actually, sort of is thought bound by language, right?
And or is feeling bound by language?
And is feeling bound by language? I don't know. And how does that apply to those of us who live among different languages and have different relationships with different people? and therefore different emotions with different people in different languages, right? So, you know, I mean, if we take the example of the emotion of, I don't know, joy, let's take a positive emotion. I mean, if I feel joy in English, which I have, and or joy in Bengali, which I have, or joy in Italian, which I have, you know, I mean, those are, they're different. It's the same emotion, but they are expressed differently. And there are words, there are very powerful words and ways to express that, that feel so distinct, you know, feel so distinct. I think there's certain emotions in certain languages that, I mean, I know this because of my upbringing, and because I was raised with another language. There were so many emotions that even if we were speaking in English, within the family, for whatever reason, we were always pulling in the Bengali, because those were very deep emotions that we couldn't find words, even though we knew they were there, you know. And that's what's so interesting about having relationships with different languages, that, you know, certain words kind of claim you somehow, and it's very hard to substitute them, even though it's possible to substitute them, you know, because they convey a certain flavor, or really an emotion, you know, is, I think, what we're really talking about.
Yes. And then how does it feel? This is my question then. You actually came into Italian as an adult. How does it compare to the language you use as a child, with all the emotions in that language, versus when you came into a language already mature, already have your entire being formed?
Well, because I think that in order to learn a new language, you have to be a child again.
Okay.
That's the only way. I mean, you can't learn a language you can't be in control when you're learning a language. So if, roughly speaking, we think of childhood as this sort of, you know, we're wavering, we're a bit out of control. We don't know how to walk in a straight line, you know, and we don't know all the rules. We're still learning, right? That's the only way to learn a language, no matter how old you are. You know, you stumble, you fall, you make mistakes, you realize, you listen, you copy, you know, you mimic sounds, rhythms. That's the only way to learn how to learn a language. And so you know, yes, I learned Italian as an adult, but I was going back to a fundamental experience of childhood.
Yes.
You know,
I think, you know, I would have to apologize to, there are a lot of questions, we won't be able to go over all of them. I'll just try to fit in a few more. Often your novels are about the immigrant experience, particularly in a new environment. Do you see this novel as an evolution of that writing?
I think this novel is an iteration of those themes. I think it's just another iteration of the themes I've been exploring, the themes of alienation, of solitude, of place, of borders, that have been running through my work from the beginning. So I don't think it's an evolution, but I think of it as another iteration. I think all of my books are iterations on a set of core themes.
Yes. On the theme of solitude, there's another audience question. Solitude is central to the novel, yet your art makes it possible for the reader to inhabit the world of whereabouts. Did you imagine a certain kind of reader when you translated this beautiful book?
Oh, well, thank you for that nice word, that nice adjective. Did I think about the reader? Not really. I mean, I know I don't really think about the reader when I'm writing until a very late stage, you know, but I think writing is solitude. Writing has always been solitude. Writing has been is an act of conscious solitude and withdrawal, and then the book is written, and and I begin to realize that the dream is going to be over now, and I'm going to have to wake up from this book. And that's when I start to break that veil of solitude, right, that one needs for the book. And then I open it up to, you know, a reader, another reader, you know, like literally like 1 or 2 or 3 readers, to just get a sense of, is this dream, does this dream translate? I mean, I think the word translate is important here, because we don't know. We don't know when we're writing the book if the dream has meaning for others, right? But I think that the first step is to dream the book. And so that's how every book I've written has been born. It is a solitary dream. And then you wake up from it, you realize, okay, you kind of smell someone making coffee downstairs, and you realize this is not going to go on forever, and you have to emerge, and you have to emerge from the book. And that's the point when I think about the readers. And then I think, you know, and then it's very important for those readers to say, the book is speaking to me. What this dream has meaning. It has that act of translation is coherent, is successful, you know. And then there's kind of a switch, and then suddenly I'm no longer in the making of the book and the real composition of the book. It's a different kind of relationship to the book, to make it clearer, to make it coherent for a potential reader. And then I become a potential reader of the book, because I'm no longer dreaming the book.
Yes, that's a beautiful way to put it. I think we're running out of time, but just one quick question. What dreams are you dreaming now? Work-wise? What new projects are you
I'm dreaming lots of things right now. I mean, I wrote a book of poetry. That dream's over, actually. That book's about to come out next month. And I've also written a book of short stories in Italian as well. And that book is pretty much also done. So I'm actually I'm really actually not dreaming right now. I mean, I'm writing things. I'm awake. I'm very awake, and I'm writing things. I'm finishing things, and I'm kind of polishing things and fine tuning things. And I'm doing a lot of writing, sort of essay writing, literary criticism. I'm writing a book on translation. I'm writing a long essay on Gramsci and translation right now. That's sort of what I'm thinking about, but I'm not dreaming that, you know. It's different. Those are different kinds of projects.
Yes.
So yeah. So I think my hope is I'm actually really dreaming of what you are now, the dream that is about to end for you, which is your sabbatical. So I'm dreaming about my sabbatical so that I can dream again. And I'm hoping that when I'm on sabbatical, some new project will come to me, and I'll enter back into that space. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Jhumpa. It's such a beautiful night to listen to you, and I'm going to welcome Piers back.
Oh,
thank you. Thank you, dear friend and
much.
colleague. Thank you, Yiyun. Thank you.
Well, that is it for tonight. That is a beautiful way to end it. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. The two of you have been such a rich, beautiful, brilliant conversation. Lots of love in the chat. Thank you all so much.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye, Jhumpa.
Bye. See you soon.